What if I told you that a mother's desperate decision to sell her daughter, a daughter everyone called ugly, would lead to the most incredible transformation Africa has ever witnessed? Before we dive into this mind-blowing story, please don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more amazing African folktales that will change how you see the world. This story from the heart of Nigeria will make you question everything you think you know about beauty, destiny, and the power of a mother's love. By the end of this video, you'll understand why sometimes our greatest struggles become our most powerful blessings. So grab your favorite snack, get comfortable, and let me take you on a journey that will leave you speechless. In the bustling heart of Benue State, Nigeria, where the Benue River flows like liquid gold through fertile lands, lived a woman named Adiz. Now, Adiz wasn't your ordinary mother. She was a widow who carried herself with the dignity of a queen despite having only tattered clothes to her name. Her daughter Chioma was, well, let me put this gently, she was what the villagers cruelly called different. While other girls her age were praised for their beauty, Chioma had features that seemed to clash rather than work together. Her eyes were too small, her nose too wide, her skin too dark even for their already dark-skinned community. But here's where this story gets interesting. And trust me, you'll want to stick around because what happens next will blow your mind. Adiz was 45 years old, a former trader who had lost her husband to illness. She watched every day as her 18-year-old daughter faced the cruel world with incredible kindness despite how terribly people treated her. Chioma had amazing skills in traditional crafts, but in their farming community, beauty mattered more than talent. The social rules were harsh and simple. If you weren't beautiful, you didn't matter. And by their standards, poor Chioma didn't stand a chance. Every morning, as the sun rose over the red earth of Benue, Chioma would wake up hoping that somehow, miraculously, she would be beautiful. The first light of dawn would slip through the cracks of their small mud house, painting the walls in shades of orange and gold. And there she would be, sitting in front of the small, cracked mirror her mother had saved from better times. She would stare at her reflection for long minutes, as if waiting for the mirror to change its mind. She would whisper silently, maybe today I will look different. She wished she could be like Ngozi, the village beauty with almond-shaped eyes that seemed to dance in the sunlight. Or Amara, whose skin glowed like polished bronze, whose smile could melt even the hardest of hearts. But each time, the reflection staring back at Chioma was the same. And with a sigh, she would tie her wrapper and step out into a world that had already decided her worth. The village children were ruthless. They had songs about Chioma's appearance, songs that stung worse than whips. Sometimes, they would clap their hands, dancing around her, chanting cruel words. And when she tried to join their games, they would scatter like startled birds, running away as if ugliness was something you could catch. And the boys? Don't even get me started on how they treated her. They threw stones, not at her body, but at her heart. Words sharper than knives. They laughed when she fetched water, mocked when she carried firewood, teased her even when she worked in silence. Now, pause for a moment and ask yourself, how many of us know this pain? How many of us have felt invisible, not because of who we are inside, but because of how we look outside? If you've ever been laughed at for something you cannot change, then you understand Chioma's silent tears. But here's where this story gets even more heartbreaking before it gets better. Adiz, her mother, was not blind to her daughter's suffering. She tried everything a loving mother could. She mixed herbs her grandmother had taught her about, hoping some ancient remedy would change Chioma's appearance. She braided Chioma's hair in the most beautiful patterns, fingers moving with love and prayer. She even sold her last piece of jewelry, the only reminder of her late husband, to buy her daughter a gorgeous wrapper from the market. Picture that for a moment. a mother giving away her last treasure, not for herself, but to help her daughter feel seen. But nothing worked. If anything, the contrast made Chioma's features seem even more different from what people expected. Still, Chioma did not stop living. She poured her heart into her crafts. Hours upon hours, she would weave baskets strong enough to carry heavy yams, mold clay into pots that could hold water cool as spring, string tiny beads into necklaces that sparkled in the sun. Her hands were magic. But in that village, nobody cared about her hands when they couldn't get past her face. Isn't that the way the world often works? People see the surface, but they miss the treasure buried inside. Then came the day that changed everything, though not in the way you might expect. The rains had failed for 3 long months. The yam harvest was terrible. The earth cracked under the hot sun, farmers stared at empty fields, and hunger crept like a shadow into every home. Adi's small trading business fell apart. No crops to sell. No goods to trade. They were down to eating once a day, sometimes not at all. Nights were long, stomachs empty, and hope seemed to vanish with every passing dawn. It was during this season of hardship, when despair hung heavy in the air, that Adis heard a name whispered in the marketplace, a name that would soon turn their world upside down. The name was Mrs. Patience Okoro. Mrs. Patience Okoro was what you might call a mystery. She had moved to Bainway from Lagos about 5 years earlier, buying the largest house in 3 villages combined. Now, this wasn't just any house. It was a mansion, with tall gates painted in bright colors, walls high enough to block curious eyes, and windows that glittered like the eyes of a watchful spirit. People in the village would pass by, slow their steps, and whisper to one another. Because in a place where most people still lived in mud houses with thatched roofs, a mansion like that was not just unusual, it was almost suspicious. She was wealthy. And when I say wealthy, I mean the kind of wealth that made jaws drop. She had drivers for her drivers. Her cars, shiny, black and sleek, rolled through the dusty village roads like kings among peasants. Her clothes were flown in from abroad, her headscarves brighter than the market stalls, and her jewelry sparkled even under the dullest sun. But Mrs. Patience had one problem that all her money couldn't solve. She couldn't have children. And in our culture, that's not just a personal tragedy, it's a social disaster. The whispers were endless. Some said she was cursed. Others said she had used her womb in exchange for wealth from dark powers. And of course, some dismissed her entirely, saying, "What use is a woman who has no child?" Isn't it strange, my friends? A woman can build a mansion, feed 100 mouths, dress in gold, and still the world will reduce her to one question: where is your child? Word soon got around that Mrs. Patience was looking for a young girl to take care of, not permanently, but for a period of 5 years. In exchange, she promised to pay the family enough money to change their lives forever. Now here comes the twist. And I want you to listen carefully, because this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Mrs. Patience had one specific requirement. She did not want the prettiest girl in the village. She did not want the cleverest, or the most well-behaved. No. She wanted the girl everyone else rejected. Yes, you heard me right. While other wealthy women might ask for the most beautiful girls, Mrs. Patience asked for the one nobody wanted. The gossip spread like wildfire. At the market, women bent over their baskets of tomatoes and whispered, "Did you hear? The rich madam wants an ugly child." By the well, girls fetching water giggled behind their hands. At the palm wine joint, men shook their heads in confusion. Nobody could understand why. But inside one small, broken house, a widow named Adiz was faced with the hardest decision of her life. Her daughter was miserable, mocked every day, barely eating. Adiz herself was exhausted, thin from hunger, weary from worry. And here was a chance to give her child a new life, while saving herself from starvation. But at what cost? Because, let's be honest, this wasn't adoption. This wasn't guardianship. This was, in every sense, selling her child. The night before she made the decision, Adiz did not sleep. She sat on the floor, her back against the mud wall, holding Chioma in her arms. She stroked her daughter's hair as Chioma dozed, and tears slipped down her face silently. She whispered prayers, half to God, half to her ancestors, asking for forgiveness for what she was about to do. "Please," she begged, "if this is wrong, stop me. If this is right, protect her." And I want you to pause here and imagine, what would you do? If you were in Adiz's shoes, with nothing left, your child suffering, and one desperate option on the table, would you take it? Would you give your child away, not knowing if it would save her or destroy her? Sometimes, desperate times call for desperate choices. And sometimes, what looks like the worst decision turns out to be the best thing that ever happened. And so, with trembling hands and a breaking heart, Adiz chose the path that would change everything. She chose Mrs. Patience Okoro. When Chioma arrived at Mrs. Patience's mansion, and I mean mansion, this place had more rooms than their village had houses, she expected to be treated like a servant. Her heart pounded as the big iron gates swung open. For a moment, she almost turned back. She thought, maybe Mama will change her mind. Maybe this is a mistake. But there was no turning back. Her mother had already walked away, her wrapper trailing in the dust, hiding tears she didn't want her daughter to see. Chioma stepped inside, clutching the small bag that held all she owned, 2 wrappers, 1 pair of sandals, and the cracked mirror she could not let go of. She expected to be ordered to sweep the floors, wash the dishes, scrub the massive compound. She expected to sleep on the cold floor in the servants' quarters. She expected harsh words, maybe even beatings if she failed. But Mrs. Patience had completely different plans. Instead of giving Chioma chores, Mrs. Patience put her in school, not just any school, but the finest private school in the state capital. A school with painted classrooms, shiny desks, and teachers who spoke English so smoothly it sounded like music. Instead of making her sleep with the servants, she gave her a room that was bigger than the entire house Chioma had shared with her mother. The bed was soft, the sheets smelled of roses, and there was even a wardrobe filled with clothes. Clothes she had never imagined touching, let alone wearing. But that's not the shocking part. Are you ready for this? Mrs. Patience began teaching Chioma something that would change her life forever. She taught her that beauty isn't what you see, it's what you show the world. Every morning, Mrs. Patience would make Chioma stand in front of a huge mirror. At first, Chioma trembled, remembering all the pain her small cracked mirror had given her. But this time was different. Mrs. Patience didn't point out flaws. She didn't say, "Your eyes are too small," or "Your skin is too dark." Instead, she made Chioma find one thing she liked about herself every single day. "Your eyes may be small," Mrs. Patience would say, "but they're the most honest eyes I've ever seen. They don't lie. Your smile may not be perfect, but it's real in a world full of fake smiles." Day after day, week after week, Mrs. Patience worked on building something inside Chioma that nobody had ever tried to build before, her confidence. She taught her how to walk with her head high, even when people stared. She taught her how to speak clearly and with purpose, not mumble as though her words didn't matter. She showed her how to dress in ways that made her feel powerful, instead of trying to hide behind oversized clothes. But the most important lesson was this: they will always see your face first, Mrs. Patience would say, but they will remember your mind long after they've forgotten what you look like. Now let me ask you, how many of us have spent years trying to please others with how we look, forgetting that what really lasts is how we think, how we speak, how we live? Chioma began to change. At first slowly, like a seed pushing through the soil after heavy rain. She started looking people in the eye. She started raising her hand in class. She even started laughing more. Real laughter, not the quiet, nervous giggles of someone trying to stay invisible. Her classmates still whispered. Some still laughed. But for the first time, Chioma didn't shrink. She was beginning to understand a truth that most people never discover. You cannot control what people call you, but you can control what you answer to. And little did she know, the journey had only just begun. One afternoon, Chioma was alone in her new room. The air conditioner hummed softly, a sound she had never heard growing up. She sat at her desk, surrounded by books, pencils, and paper. She had been reading a story in her English textbook about great inventors, people who created things that changed the world. Something stirred in her heart. Something she had never dared to believe about herself. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had once been mocked for making baskets nobody wanted to buy, the same hands that had shaped clay pots for a mother who could barely afford food. And she whispered to herself, maybe I was never meant to be beautiful on the outside. Maybe I was meant to create beauty with my hands. It was in that moment that everything shifted. She started sketching. She began weaving again, but this time with a new vision. Instead of simple baskets, she started designing patterns so complex, so breathtaking, they looked like something from another world. Her beadwork transformed too. Gone were the simple strings she once sold in the village market. Now she created designs that sparkled, each one telling a story. Her fingers moved like they were dancing, fast, precise, full of grace. But here's the most powerful part. When her classmates mocked her looks, she no longer cried. Instead, she poured that pain into her art. Every insult became a new design. Every cruel word became a bead on her string. Every rejection became a brushstroke in her sketch. Have you ever turned your pain into power? Have you ever taken the very thing that tried to break you and used it to build yourself instead? That's exactly what Chioma was learning to do. One day, Mrs. Patience walked into her room unannounced. She froze. On the desk were dozens of sketches, bags, necklaces, fabrics, pottery. A small kingdom of beauty, all born from the hands of a girl the world had called ugly. Mrs. Patience didn't say a word at first. She simply picked up a sketch, studied it, then looked at Chioma. Finally, she said, "Chioma, this is your gift. The world may not have given you beauty on the outside, but God gave you the power to create it. And do you know what that means? You will never lack. You will never beg. Because people will always pay for true beauty, especially when it comes from the soul." That night, Chioma lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding. For the first time in her life, she believed she had something to offer. Not just to her mother. Not just to Mrs. Patience. But to the world. She clutched her cracked old mirror, the one she had carried from her village, and smiled. For years, that mirror had been her enemy. But now she realized, it had only ever shown her one kind of truth. The outside truth. But she had finally discovered the deeper one. The truth that she was more than a face. She was a creator. A dreamer. A survivor. And this discovery? It was about to open doors that no insult, no rejection, no cruelty could ever shut. By the time Chioma turned 21, something incredible had happened. She hadn't become what most people call beautiful, her features were still the same. But something much more important had changed. She walked differently. She talked differently. She carried herself with a confidence that was magnetic. When she entered a room, people noticed her, not because of her face, but because of her presence. She had learned to command attention through intelligence, kindness, and unshakable self-belief. Mrs. Patience had been preparing Chioma for this moment. Together, they started a business empire that began with traditional crafts, the very skills Chioma had learned as a child, but grew into something massive. They started small, selling Chioma's beautiful beadwork and pottery to tourists. But Chioma had bigger dreams and the business knowledge to make them real. Within 2 years, she had built the largest craft export business in West Africa. Her company employed over 500 people and was shipping traditional Nigerian art all over the world. But here's the most beautiful part of this story. Chioma didn't use her success for revenge. Instead, she returned to her village not as someone seeking payback, but as someone wanting to help. She built schools, hospitals, provided scholarships for young people, and most importantly, she started a foundation for girls who were rejected by society because of how they looked. "I want every girl who feels ugly to know," she would tell them, "that ugly is just a word people use when they can't see your worth. And your worth has nothing to do with your face." Months passed, and the girl who once hid her face in shame was slowly becoming someone else. Someone stronger, someone brighter, someone unstoppable. Chioma began attending art fairs and small exhibitions that Mrs. Patience sponsored. At first, she was shy, hiding behind the tables where her beadwork and baskets were displayed. She thought, "Who would buy from someone like me? They'll laugh when they see my face." But then something surprising happened. People didn't laugh. They didn't even ask about her appearance. Instead, they leaned in closer, marveling at her work. "Who made this necklace?" one woman asked, her fingers brushing across the delicate beads. "Who wove this basket? It looks like something fit for a queen," another said. And when Chioma timidly raised her hand and whispered, "I did," their eyes lit up with genuine admiration. That day, she made her very first sale. Not just one, every single piece was sold. She went home clutching the money, not because of its value, but because of what it represented, proof. Proof that she was worthy. Now let me ask you, how many of us wait for the world to validate us, forgetting that the power to believe in ourselves must come first? How many times have we hidden our talents because of what others might say? Chioma no longer hid. She began to speak up at school, sometimes even leading group projects. She entered a statewide art competition, pouring weeks of effort into her design. And though she didn't win first place, she received something even more valuable, recognition. Her work was displayed alongside others, her name spoken with respect. And with every step forward, something inside her healed. She began writing letters to her mother, Adiz, who was still struggling in the village. In every letter, she told her, "Mama, don't cry anymore. Don't feel guilty. You gave me a way to save me, and now I see why. I am no longer just your daughter, I am your legacy. One day, I will make you proud." Can you imagine the tears in Adiz's eyes as she read those words? The same woman who once believed she had cursed her daughter with ugliness now realized her sacrifice had given that daughter a future brighter than anything she had dreamed. But here's the most powerful part of this transformation. Chioma was no longer defined by how the world treated her. She was no longer the ugly girl whispered about in the market. She had become something far greater, a living example that beauty is not skin deep. And let me ask you one more question, my dear listener. What if we stopped judging people by their faces and started seeing the gifts in their hands, the kindness in their hearts, the courage in their souls? How different would our world be? Mrs. Patience's secret wasn't really a secret at all. It was understanding that society's idea of beauty is temporary and shallow, but the beauty that comes from confidence, intelligence, and kindness lasts forever and has real power. Chioma had learned that being rejected by small minds was actually a gift. It had freed her from trying to please people who didn't matter and allowed her to focus on becoming someone who did matter. Today, Chioma's foundation has helped thousands of young girls across Africa. Her business empire continues to grow. And most importantly, she has proven that your value has nothing to do with what people see when they look at your face. So the next time someone tells you that you're not enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not anything enough, remember Chioma's story. Remember that sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. What did you think of this incredible transformation? Have you ever felt underestimated because of your appearance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please smash that like button, subscribe for more amazing African folktales, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest videos. Remember, your greatest weakness might just be your greatest strength waiting to be discovered. And always remember Chioma's most important lesson: beauty fades, but the strength of your character and the power of your mind can change the world. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.